Okay, so today we want to talk about BirdDog Play and kind of the use case and how BirdDog envisions it being used. It definitely is different than the other decoding devices that BirdDog makes. And there's some key differences that you should know. You probably see them already on the BirdDog website at birddog.tv. But today I want to just demonstrate, kind of go through the web UI, get you used to that, show you kind of it in a use case scenario, and a couple other things that we're doing in the office that are also, other ways that we're using the product. So Play essentially is a very lightweight, inexpensive device that allows you to show an NDI stream on your network. And it's able to take various forms of NDI, which is kind of a first for BirdDog, but also it's a very small form factor. Now, there's a couple of things that in order to keep the price as low as we did and to make it as kind of versatile as we could, we've had to obviously make some changes. So there's no LED screen on the device, for example. It doesn't have an LED screen to show you IP address or anything like that, like many of our second generation products have, including the 4K family and our cameras, for example. So the P240, the P110, all those types of cameras have little screens on them. This one does not. This one also doesn't have PoE, and so that is a common misconception that people have about these is, all BirdDog products have PoE on board. This particular product did not. And again, the PoE module is, from the manufacturing realm, is more money, a little more expensive to integrate, generates a lot of heat. And so there are some big factors that happen when you have to add PoE onto the device. Now, would it have been nice to make that, to have that as a secondary option or like a version 2 or something like that? Perhaps. And our goal was to make this as lightweight and as inexpensive as possible. That's one of the goals. And so we really wanted to, that was one of the objectives with this, with this first launch, was we wanted to make sure that it was lightweight. So what do you do? How do you kind of get it started? Well, the idea was that it would be USB powered. And you might think, wait, now I have to have a USB brick to plug this thing into? No. Most modern TVs have a USB port or multiples on the back of the TV. And for some televisions, you need to look this up for your particular TV. But for some televisions, it's just mostly a firmware update thing. For others, you can plug in media to it. You can put pictures, you put a whole bunch of JPEGs or whatever on a USB stick and plug it in. And then you can watch or look at those pictures on that television. Now, it's kind of a clunky way to do this. There's way more innovative ways to look at photos. But, there you go. That's one of the functions. One of the key things that you need to know about that USB port on the back of your TV, though, is how many amps it's going to give or how many volts it's going to give. You need to know the technical specs for that USB. And the good news is for the most part, most modern televisions have their user manuals online, and you can just type in the model number, which will be some ridiculous string of letters and numbers, and pull it up, on the website. And then you can find out kind of what the actual power outage is on that particular USB. What it needs to be is 1.2 or better, okay? If it's just 1, that's going to actually underpower the unit and probably cause performance issues. That's not a hard and fast rule because here, full disclosure, we haven't tested every TV there is. And so we've tested a lot of TVs. We have multiples in the HQ office. I purposely buy different brands and different sizes of TVs in this office. And so we've got a handful of TVs in here. I think there's at least 5 in this office. 3 Samsungs, an LG, and a Sony. And then we've got all sorts of monitors, right? So some monitors, modern-day monitors, can dual as a TV. And so you can actually plug in the actual Play unit to the USB port. So it's USB-C, and in the box comes a USB-C to USB-A cable. And that needs to plug into, I believe it's a 1.2 amp USB port, and then you can power up the device that way. And when you properly power up the device, you'll see a little green light turn on inside the actual front face of the device. Now, another thing that you should know is the power should be added last, okay? Because a couple things are going to happen here. You want to plug in your network, okay? So your network cable, it's still one cable coming to the device. And then you want to plug in your HDMI to the TV. and then you want to power the unit, because you want the device to power on and request a DHCP address from your properly configured NDI network to actually issue it an IP address when it first boots up. It needs to be ready to do that. So if you power it on and then you plug in your HDMI and then you plug in your network, it may miss the window to issue an IP address and might fall back to 100.100, which is currently, as of 2023, is the default fallback address for this device. All right. Now, this is also a great opportunity to just briefly talk about the differences between assigning static IP addresses and doing DHCP reservations. There are lots of theories about which you should do, okay? The first is static IP addresses. You can, I've heard integrators say, I like to have static IP addresses for all my AV devices because then I can fill them out on a spreadsheet. I put in the IP address, I put in their MAC address, and I put in where they're at and what the password is, and I can make a big master documentation. So when I'm done with the install, I hand it over to the person that wants me to do this install, and I can say, here you go. Here's all the information you need. That's great. However, if you need to take one of those devices off of the network, have it serviced, take it somewhere else, put it on a different network, you've got to go into this device and now customize it. Whereas if you had a DHCP reservation list, it wouldn't matter if you remove the device from the network or not. It will always be issued the same IP address every time you join it. And the way you do that is you go into the actual DHCP service on your network, which is a little more sophistication, but it's not scary, okay? If you can type in the word youtube.com, you can figure out how to do this. But you can fill out the DHCP reservation list on your networking side. This means that you don't have to individually log into every single one of these. You just have to power cycle it. So you can put in the MAC address in the DHCP list, and then you put in the desired IP address, and then you reboot the device. And your DHCP will see this come on and request an IP address, and then it will give it the IP address that you specify on the list. Again, the nice thing is like maybe I got to take this off and I need to use it somewhere else. Well, now you can take it to another NDI network that's running a DHCP and plug it in, and it will get an IP address. You don't have to go in and change it. Or maybe you need to send it in and have it serviced. Well, now we don't have to go back and forth with you about whether or not what's the IP range, where is this device, what's its short name. Give us something to help us service it. You can just ship it to us as is. We can plug it into our network here in the service department and re-image it or fix it or do whatever we need to do and send it back to you. And then when you re-add it to your network, the DHCP already knows that MAC address and boom, assigns it that same IP address that you already had. What I like about the DHCP reservation, if you haven't figured it out already, but by the tone of my voice, what I like about that in an AV situation is you can take devices on and off networks and you centralize all of that customization. So it's all in one place. And modern day DHCP services will allow you to export all of that information. So not only can you go in and you can customize everything and you can give one login and all that information is in one place in the DHCP service, but also then you can export all of that and keep it off site, right? Put it in your Google Drive. And so when the customer calls you and says, hey, we just had a catastrophic failure and our entire server just went up in flames, then you can roll up and say, no problem, and you import your settings, everything's done, okay? It is way less work. It's the same amount of work to set it up static as it is DHCP reservation, but long-term support, how long it's going to take you to service that account will be a whole lot shorter, I promise you. So I'm an advocate of the DHCP reservation list for multiple reasons. As you know, static networks they're not easier, they're harder, they require more customization. And so if I can make your life a little bit easier, I would strongly recommend that. Okay, now back to the BirdDog Play. Okay, so the Play then, we've plugged in our HDMI, we plug in our network, and then we power it up with the USB-C. Pro tip, this is why you tune into the show or why you're watching this video post. The pro tip is you can buy, okay, on Amazon for less than $15, or if you want to buy the expensive one, it's $20. You can buy PoE splitters that will split the power over Ethernet that's coming over your network that you've already got. I already invested in good switches, 4250s. I've already invested in great AV switches that supply PoE. I can use something called a PoE splitter, okay, not an injector, a PoE splitter, and that will output the power from the PoE switch to a DC jack. And I've actually done this. I'm doing it right now in my office as a test. But I use just a little PoE splitter, and then I plug in the DC jack, and that's a DC to USB-C little jumper cable. And then I can turn these into PoE powered. So I still only need one cable. And I don't have to use the USB power. And the expensive one, the PoE splitter, the expensive one allows you to do 12 volts, 9 volts, or 5 volts. So I just switch it to 5 volts, plug it in, and away I go. It has been operating beautifully for the past 3 weeks. So pro tip, that's why you would do that. Okay, we plug those 3 things in, and then our device boots up. Now, the cool thing about BirdDog Play, shout out to the engineers on this, is that the BirdDog Play shows the BirdDog logo when it fully boots up, and it tells you in large, friendly numbers, what the IP address is. Shout out to Douglas Adams. Large, friendly numbers on the screen what the IP address is. And if your DHCP reservation is working correctly, it will show it correctly on the screen. So boom, checks and balance, that's working correctly. So now we can punch in that IP address on a computer. And if you type like this, I'm sorry for you, but you could type it in and go to Chrome, type in the IP address that's showing up on the screen, just straight, just 192.168.1 dot whatever it is or whatever you set it as. Okay, and then it's going to take you to the web UI. And so we're going to boot up and it's going to look like this or something very similar to this. And this is the play that I'm using in this show right now live. Okay, I'm using a play as my confidence monitor. And so I've got a whole bunch, I've got a grid. I'll talk about this, how this is configured in a minute so that you can kind of get an idea as to a use case as to what you might do with this. But here is the web UI for this BirdDog Play. And so currently running at 25% CPU, which is amazing. That's amazing. And it's using 7% of the network. Now, before you get into the mathematics, well, that means he's using 70 megs, or that means he's doing that. Just calm. This is not a real-time, millisecond grade monitoring system. It's doing, I think, 1 check every second. So it's a great, to see if something's wrong or it's overheating or it's having issues. But in general, it's taking a snapshot every second or every 2 seconds. I forget exactly what it was. And it's showing it here on the web UI, much like all BirdDog devices, right? That's how you think about this. But the dashboard, I'm not even logged in here, but the dashboard gives me great, useful information about what's going on with the play. So it tells me what stream name I'm connected to. And if you're good at reading this little code here, you'll know that this is Multiviewer Pro for Mac. I'm running Multiviewer Pro for Mac. That's what I'm showing. The format is just straight up full NDI. If you're sending a play an HX signal, it will actually indicate HX. Really cool. Glad that that's there. That's why you would do that, because, I am running an HX signal, and that's why my network bandwidth is like 3%. The audio status, as at time of recording, this is just always going to say mute. Okay, so don't get too confused here, but that's always going to say mute. But then the useful information here, I'm not sending it audio, so that just is not available. But I am running in multicast, and that's actually a setting that I've set on the play itself. All right, so I'm running in multicast. It's 1080. Okay, that's what we would say. It's 1920 by 1080, but it's 1080, and it's running at 30 frames. Now, I'm running a progressive stream here because that's what Multiviewer is outputting. But I'm running 1080p 30, and the video sample size is 422. All right, so it gives me all that data. Now, the audio, I'm not sending it audio, and so that's irrelevant at this point. I haven't put an audio stream on there, but it's not active. The system name is the MDNS short name that you would use to get to this device. And so let's open up Chrome one more time. And I'm going to type in BirdDog-play1 1.local /. And if I hit enter on that, whoops, I hit shift. If I hit enter on that, puts me back to the dashboard, okay? This is the name that the BirdDog Play has tried to register with the MDNS. And if it did it correctly, you should be able to use the short name to get to it. So if you have plays, one in every room or in the hallway, and you've got one in the west and one in the east halls, and you call it BirdDog-West, BirdDog-East, okay, you go to your web UI and you type in BirdDog-West.local / and hit enter. It'll take you to the web UI. This means that when the Play is doing something, you don't need to know its IP address, because you, as the installer or the designer, know, oh, that's the West Play, so we'll just type in BirdDog-West. It doesn't matter what the IP address is. It will take me to the dashboard. And then I can find out, oh, it's got a 1.191, which is also displayed here on the dashboard, right? And it tells us what firmware we're running. Now, this is a beta firmware, so don't mind that. But this is firmware 20 is how we talk about that at the BirdDog, in the BirdDog world. So we're running what firmware we're running. Is it working? So this is an important status. If this is saying inactive, or it's flashing active, inactive, or doing anything other than just showing active full time, you know something's up. Okay? So you know that there's a malfunction of some sort. It's not getting the NDI signal, or having a networking issue, or the Play might be malfunctioning. Something's up, all right? So that's a really important thing to know. And the other important thing to know is to do full NDI, you have to have a gig network connection. And so this thing will tell you, it'll tell your network what speed it's running at. And we have seen blips on the radar where some Plays check in at 100. So verify, if you're having performance issues, verify that your network is able to send it 1 gig speeds, and verify that the port on the switch that the Play is plugged into is set to full duplex 1 gig or higher. Okay, this will negotiate down to 1 gig, but if your switch is throttling down or having some sort of issue with the auto detect and it's only sending it 100, you're not going to be able to do full NDI. Why? Because most full NDI sources are going to be over 100 megs, right? So you're going to cap out. That'll be your bottleneck. So the network speed is really helpful information to have on the dashboard. And again, big shout out to the engineers here for doing this and making this available. You don't even need to log in. You can just see this information for yourself, okay? So really helpful. And of course, here on the support show, I have my whole network as DHCP, as I believe is the way the Lord intended it. Okay, so this is the take that for what it's worth. All right, so let's go ahead and log in. And we just type in our super secret password. And by the way, pro tip here, it's always BirdDog, lowercase, all one word, because BirdDog is one word for this company, but it's all lowercase. The default password is BirdDog. If you're in a non-secure location, you might consider changing it, but please write that down in the documentation, okay, that you're making. Write down what the password is, because it's really frustrating when we get your customers contacting BirdDog support and they're like, Joe Schmo set this up and I don't know what he set the passwords at. It's like, ugh. Did he give you any documentation? He's like, well, he did, but he didn't tell us what the passwords are. If you're going to change the password, please include that on the master documentation so that the person knows what it is that you set it at. Okay, so I logged in, and it bumped me right back to the dashboard. And the dashboard is a really helpful place, because when you log in, you're given 2 more options, which you've already noticed here. We have a device restart, and we have a system reboot. Now, my face is over the reboot button, but it just says reboot. Okay, you can trust me on that. And if I hit restart, the device restart button actually restarts the NDI function of the device. Okay, so if I hit restart, it's going to pause my NDI stream. It's going to reboot that NDI function. Okay, there's a process that's happening behind the scenes. And what it does is it kills that function and restarts it. Okay. If I hit reboot, it's going to put the device back into a full-on boot from beginning, okay? Start over, re-request an IP, do all of that. So if I hit reboot, it's going to be a different thing than hitting device restart. Device restart, another way to think of it is NDI restart, okay? That's another way I like to think about it is if I need to restart my NDI stream and I need to restart the processes that are decoding the NDI stream, device restart is a quick way to do that without having to reboot the whole thing and wait for the 1.5-minute boot up sequence to happen, okay? So that is overall the gist of the dashboard when you log in. Now, next screen is network, and we've done this ad nauseum with a lot of our products, but I want to be sure that we go over this. If for some reason you have to set this up as static and you don't have the luxury of doing it properly on a DHCP reservation list, this is where you could change these functions. Now, if, for example, you needed to run static, you know the rule. You need to probably set up a discovery server to do the MDNS function, because that's kind of, it's hard for me to say required, but it's pretty much required for static setup, okay? So if you're going to run static, you need to be running discovery server. Well, this is the screen where you'd set all that up. Okay, so we can switch it to static and we can assign an IP address. We really want to keep the rule, okay, the single subnet, that's really not what it's called, but it's a WAC 224 subnet. we want to set up our network, our NDI networks, to be a 22255 subnet mask, okay? So that means you get 256 addresses. And if you're doing more than that, you're probably looking at a more sophisticated network anyways, okay? So 22255 is great for those of you who are doing 200 devices or less. And that is a massive, massive amount of NDI, all right? And if you're running 200 NDI sources and decoders, a combination of whatever, you're going to be talking multicast anyways. And so, this should be enough for those of you who are just getting started with BirdDog Play. It needs to be done in DHCP, and you need to have a 22255 network. And then you absolutely have to have a gateway address, okay? In the static realm, in the AV world, a gateway address is generally not required. It is with NDI, okay? You heard it here first. It is with NDI, and you need to have that as a part of this. Don't leave that blank. It's going to cause problems. If you don't have a default gateway address, then it needs to be a Windows PC on the network. Okay, set that as your static IP address or as your default gateway. And the reason why is because Windows actually does this function on its own, regardless if it's in static or not. It does network discovery because it's finding out, hey, like who's who. It does a little snooping around on the network to find out where everybody is. And so a Windows computer can act as your gateway as a reference to how to navigate the network. That's one of the functions of the gateway itself, is to kind of give direction as to, oh, you want to go from that port to this port on the network? Well, here's how you do it. And it can like lay out Windows PCs also do that for themselves to find out what's the fastest way to accomplish my job. And we can utilize that a little bit by pointing these devices at a Windows PC. So pro tip, you're not going to find that anywhere else, by the way, just right here. BirdDogJohn.tv. So check that out. All right. So we set up our static address here if that's what we need to do. If you have a slow or older DHCP, you can change the timeout. Now, I caution you, okay, deviating from the expected. If you change this from 20 to 40, you're going to notice the IP acquisition and boot up times of a device greatly increase, okay? So if you have a slow DHCP or it's like on the other side of your campus and it's going to take a while for that ping request to make it all the way down the chain, all right, you might consider increasing the DHCP timeout because that will give the chip longer. It'll stay open and awake and broadcasting longer, asking for an address. But that's becoming less and less of a requirement as technology gets to the place that it's going, and whatever that is. And anyway, sorry, my brain. So increasing that's why you would do that. If you've got a massive infrastructure or an older, slower, maybe your DHCP service is operating on a server that's really slow, like a Windows 2012, something like that it has low RAM and memory. Like, anyways, if it's just slow, you might consider doing something like that. DHCP fallback address. I strongly, strongly encourage you not to change this. And here's the theory. People say, why wouldn't I change that to the desired IP I want, and then I can just put it in DHCP but not have a DHCP, and then I'll always fall back to that address. Okay, I see your logic there, but this is really supposed to be considered more of a service address. If something goes wrong and the device goes to 100, you know something is wrong. But if something goes wrong and the thing falls back always to the address that it's supposed to be at, you don't know where it's failing. You just don't know. And so this should really be a fallback address that's unique, and that if you walk by and you see 100 on the screen, you know, hey, something's wrong. Something's wrong with the network, something's wrong with the device, something is wrong because it's getting a 100 address. So I strongly recommend you not changing it. And in the same breath, I strongly recommend that you design your networks not with the 192.168.100 number. Because if you build a network that's 192.168.100 dot something, again, something might take 100 because it's a valid license. It's a valid address. So my network, take a look at this screen, okay? 192.168.1 dot. Okay, so if I see a 100 address on any of my networks, I've got multiples in this office, by the way. If I see 100 on anything, I know something's wrong here. Something's wrong. This is failing because it's getting a 100 address, and 100 is not in my realm. So, pro tip: don't design your DHCP networks to be 100 networks. Leave that as a unique address on the BirdDog devices, and pick 192.168.99. or 101 or 192.168.1. You can use that one. I'll give you permission. It's not exclusive for me. Make it something unique. Pick your favorite number between 1 and 250. Pick your favorite number and put it in that third octet, 192.168. But just don't pick 100, because that will make things confusing for you and your customer. It'll be one more thing that you have to learn. Oh, is it getting the 100 address from the DHCP, or is it malfunctioning, right? Don't use 100. Use something else. Just, there you go. Anyways, we won't go down that realm. Okay, and then the fallback, this should never be changed either, by the way. This should always be 22255 in the DHCP fallback subnet mask. Leave that as is. Now, remember when I used BirdDog-play1.local to get into this web UI? Well, this is where you would change that. This is the short name that gets registered with the IP address on the MDNS on your network. Okay, so either your MDNS through the DHCP or Discovery Server. This is where that short name gets registered. So when I call that name on a browser on Chrome, and I type in BirdDog-play1.local /, okay, remember that /. When I type that in, it takes me to this site. And if you've noticed up here in the top of this, it actually leaves it there. It doesn't replace it with the IP address, which I think is a little interesting, but it leaves it there. Well, what's great is if you know the short names of your devices, say you have a dozen, and they're in order, and you just say like play 1, play 2, play 3, play 4, play 5, and like you go down the line. The beautiful thing about it is that you don't have to remember IP addresses. You don't even really need them documented. You can just say, oh, this is the third one, so BirdDog-play3.local / enter. And it'll take you to the web UI for that device. So if you're having issues or you want to change the source or whatever, that's an easy way to do it. Now, when you make changes on this screen, you have to hit apply. Okay, and it will apply it to the board, but be cautioned that you're using Google Chrome, which has cookies and cache. Okay, and it may show you the previous information. So the way that you would double check it is to actually open this in a different link. And so if I were to open this tab now, copy and paste, it will show me the corrected information here on a new browser. Or you could do it in incognito mode, which doesn't remember anything and it loads it for the first time every time. That's another great way to make sure that your changes have gone through. All right. Finally on this screen, the network settings. This is where you would change it from TCP or RUDP, which is kind of the default out of the box, to multicast. So if you're running a multicast network, a 4250 with an NDI5 profile, for example, you could run this thing in multicast. And I actually am. And so I've selected multicast here. I am not running Discovery Server because I have an MDNS and I have a DHCP. So I don't select that. But you could turn Discovery Server on. And then this is where you would put that Discovery Server IP address in there. Now, if you don't know about Discovery Server, I've got videos about that on my channel. So be sure that you check that out. And then again, when you make changes, hit apply. Be sure you hit apply. You'll see the screen kind of flash. And that's basically just the refresh. Okay, System tab. This is really easy. And if you're familiar with BirdDog stuff already, you already know where I'm going with this. This is where you change the password for that login screen. So you put in the current password, which by default is BirdDog all lowercase. And then you put in your new password. And then you have to confirm it again. Okay, so that you can't fat finger it. And you can even show it. So if I wanted to type in like BirdDog John play, and I want that to be the thing, I could just show it here to make sure that, whoops, LastPass, get out of here, so that I could show it on both. So, BirdDog John play. And then I want to verify that that is indeed what it is that, yep, they match. Okay, cool. Then when I hit apply, then I'm good to go. But we do require you to confirm the password because we get a lot of people that are like, oh, I pressed the wrong button and hit apply, and now I didn't realize that that's what, that now I'm locked out of my device, right? Okay, system update is where you would download the firmware and update the, to the latest firmware. So you're going to go to the BirdDog downloads website. You're going to download the .fw file, and then you're going to click on system update. You're going to select that .fw file, not a zip file. You're going to select the .fw file, load it into that little container, hit upload, and then it should do its own sequence on its own. So that's where you do firmware updates. This system reboot button is the same one that's on the dashboard. Okay, this reboots the whole unit and puts you through an entire cycle. It is not an NDI restart. It is a full unit reboot. Okay, Access Manager configuration. If you wanted this device to see sources that were on a different subnet, and I have videos on this, okay, on Access Manager. We've covered this before, but this is where you put that list. And what's really cool is when you click Save, it downloads the configuration text file that you need to use to do this. And so it gives you the formatting that you need when you download it. So it's like, oh, well, I know that I have a device at 45, and I know that I have another device at 215. And then you would save, okay? And then you would load that file here and then hit upload. And if I load that file correctly, let's just give it a go. Upload. If I do it correctly, those numbers should show in this list. Look, 45 and 215. That's how it's done. All right? You heard it here first. The same thing goes for the NDI list, okay? Same thing is you can download the NDI list, the group name list, and it will tell you what the group name list needs to be. And so I could put this, I don't want to add this to a group, but I could put in my group there, load it into this container and hit upload, and if I do it correctly, it will show on that list, okay? So that's how that's done. All right, easy peasy. The next is the AV screen, and this, thankfully, it just being a decoder makes this really straightforward, okay? So the first thing is the HDMI timeout, how long this thing waits around for a signal. You can time it out if you want. I don't really find that necessary at all. Or there is also an OSD, an on-screen display that you use with CEC. We can go into that in deeper depth, but we're actually doing a fair bit of changes with those, so I won't cover that here in this video. But you can disable that on-screen display with CEC from here if you want to. And then, and that HDMI timeout, I believe that's the timeout for that screen. And then you have to do a device, if you make changes, you need to do a device restart. Now remember, that's just the NDI restart. So it's a quick little refresh of the NDI stream. Okay, this is where it really counts though, and this is where these are the major functions here. NDI audio, you remember on the dashboard how I said there's kind of a glitch where it says mute? Well, my audio is active. If I send this thing audio, it should play the audio. However, we can permanently mute this if I never want it to play the audio that's going out on the stream. And a great example is my vMix output has my microphone audio married to it, and I'm sending that over NDI to StreamYard. But if I want to watch the show, that same stream on my confidence monitor, but I don't want my TV to play the audio, I can mute it. And then I can add that. I could put the output to this screen and I could watch it that way. Now, this is where you select that source. But remember, like all BirdDog devices, you need to refresh the source list, okay? Do that 2 or 3 times and then open that list. And here are all my active sources that are happening on my network. Now, if you load it and you get list after list after list and it seems like old sources are still there, you can hit this reset button. And the reset button will dump all of those sources that it used to have, okay, in the actual memory, and then you can hit refresh, and it will actually then pull a new list of just the sources, okay? So that's a much shorter list than what I had. I had double lists before, and now I've just got one. So this is where then, okay, I can see all these sources on the network, and I want to pick one. So I'm going to pick my BirdDog Studio, and that's going to show my multi-viewer that I have on my BirdDog Multi-Viewer Pro output. The fallback source is if, for example, you're using a program out, but then the program output is going to stop. You need it to fall back to like a commercial or to a loop or to another set of cameras or something else. You can set the fallback address there. So that is what it will always show when the primary source is not being shown. Now, we have a bug that's entered for this where the fallback source seems to come and go. And so we're fixing that, and that will be fixed in a future firmware update. And then I've already used these buttons. When I hit apply, that actually applies the changes that I've made, and then you should see within 30 seconds the changes happening on the screen. Now you might say, wait a minute, we're going to see the changes in 30 seconds? Yes. These devices are decoders. They're not video switchers. And I'm going to end with this, okay? They are not video switchers. I'm going to end this portion of the Web UI overview. They're not video switchers, they're decoders, which means they're expecting a single source to be coming to them at all times, and for you to be doing the video switching on that source, like in vMix, or in TriCaster, or in Central. BirdDog Central has a routing option. You can even do it for free on NDI Router. Okay, and then you put the router output here on the list, and then you switch your sources on the router if that's what you want. And you can automate all that stuff and do a whole bunch of cool stuff with router. But this is not a thing where you're going to be like, now over to camera 3, and then you're going to pull up camera 3 and switch it here. That's not what this is. This is not a video switcher. This is a video decoder. It's an NDI decoder, and so it's expecting it to have one single NDI stream all the time. It's not expecting you to be changing streams and switching them over. If you do that, it's going to take 30 seconds, 40 seconds to stop the stream, to dump all that information, to acquire the new stream, to start decoding it, to start unpacking all of those packets, to get it on the screen. It's going to take some time to do that. They're not video switchers. They're NDI decoders. That's what they are, okay? Okay, so now I just want to show you the last thing is basically this guy in action. And I'm using a camera that's, there's no light over there, so I'm just going to show this to you briefly. But this is that actual play, the play that we were looking at, okay? This one, play 1, is this one on the screen. And so when I cut, you can see it's changing, right? You can see that on the screen. You can see me switching back and forth between the two. You can also see the clock is running in real time. You can see I have audio bars. That's actually out of Multiviewer Pro, which is maybe something we should cover next time. But I've got Multiviewer Pro, and it's sending me that stuff, and that is the output. So that's how I know. At the bottom there, you see my little head there above the camera. So I'm using that kind of like a like a bit of a confidence monitor type of idea, but I can look in the lens, but I can see that I'm centered in the shot. But then when I cut or I move over or do whatever, it shows it on that screen. That is a BirdDog play, and the play works wonderfully in this scenario, okay? As a confidence monitor, as a showing an output of a production in like a hallway or for signage or for something like that, the play really shines there. People put them up against the Flex, okay? And full disclosure, Play and Flex are two completely different decoders. They're both BirdDogs, but Flex Out and Play are different entirely. They're completely different boards. They're completely different brains. They're different hardware. They're different heat management, everything. Everything about them is different. Okay, so don't pit them one against the other because you're 100% going to see different results. People say, well, like, what is the difference? It's like the Play is going to be slower, because its primary function is decode audio as inexpensively as, or decode NDI as inexpensively as possible, and it gives you the flexibility of doing HX, but not at the full NDI standard when it comes to decode, okay? So there is that little nugget. Now, there are lots of conversations happening around Play, okay? And there's some cool things that I know are planned for the future of this product that I'm not allowed to disclose on this show. But some cool things, some innovations that are happening with engineering that is really going to propel Play into a stratosphere for the AV industry in particular. That's going to be great. So I'm really excited about it. It's a great little product. If you set it up and you're using it in this sort of scenario, it works really well. And I really enjoy it. I think there's great potential here. So, all right, I'm going to go back to the chat, and we'll take some questions.